Thanks so much, Jordan, and thank you all for joining us for our webinar this afternoon. I'm really excited about the opportunity that we have today to hear from the group at Mount St. Mary's University in Los Angeles. And I first encountered these folks not just as Weave members, but also as participants in some Weave Academy courses. And as I heard about their approach to assessment on their campus, and the way that they were trying to get broad stakeholder involvement in the inner workings of the assessment work that they were doing on campus, I just knew that this was a story that would be really worthwhile for all of our members and friends out in the higher education community to hear, and to take a few tips and tools away from this webinar that maybe you can use at your own institution. So I'm going to introduce our speakers for today, and I'm going to be fairly brief. They all have accomplished so much and contributed so much at Mount St. Mary's University, and you can read more about that in their bios, and also maybe take a look at their website for some of the tools they're actually going to show us during the webinar today. But let me introduce first Dr. Michele Starkey. She's the Associate Provost and Accreditation Liaison Officer at Mount St. Mary's. She's actually a graduate of the Mount, and Dr. Starkey began working at the university in 1997. And in her current position, she helps lead campus-wide assessments among many other responsibilities. Dr. Elizabeth Sturgeon teaches English composition and literature courses in addition to the first-year seminar at MSMU. She's a professor of English and a co-chair of the Academic Assessment Committee, and she'll talk a little bit about that and how she helps to onboard and train assessment leaders and also lead the program review efforts at Mount St. Mary's. And then we also have Dr. Lori Wright-Geary, and she's the chair of the Religious Studies Department, where she has taught since 2004. And Dr. Geary has a really unique perspective that she's going to share with us today about her conversion story from being anti-assessment to being a reluctant program assessment liaison to finally becoming a Weave certified assessment practitioner. And so she'll be telling us a little bit about how that conversion happened. So without any further time taken, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Starkey.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. As Sherry said, I'm Michele Starkey. My pronouns are she, her, and in honor of International Pronouns Day, I do have this special background to share with everyone. So today we're going to share our assessment and program review structures along with a faculty perspective. First, some institutional context, though. We are a Catholic liberal arts university located in Los Angeles, California. We are a women's college, but we do say primarily for women because we have males in our graduate programs, our adult education, and our undergraduate nursing program as well. We are founded by an order of religious nuns in 1925, Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. We do have 2 campuses, technically 3 campuses, I guess. We have one for traditional undergraduates in Brentwood or West Los Angeles. We have another one in downtown LA. And then we have a campus for our film majors too. We have around 3,000 students total with 120 full-time faculty and way over 300 adjunct faculty. So the overview of our structure. First of all, we have this academic assessment committee. It started out as a task force in 2006. I became a member in, I think it was 2008. I started as a faculty member. I was helping the then assistant provost work on assessment, institutional assessment. So this committee is co-chaired by an administrator, in this case me now, and a faculty member, Elizabeth, who you'll be meeting shortly. We also now, in 2019, we are able to make it part of our faculty governance structure. So we have 4 elected faculty members. We meet about once a month, but we also have other people on the committee that are not elected, that are appointed from various areas of the campus. And we oversee the institutional learning outcome assessment, which we use rubric scoring parties for. I'll explain more about those later in the presentation. And we also oversee our general education assessment too. And then one of the main aspects of our assessment structure too is for our program assessment. We have program assessment liaisons, or as we like to call them affectionately, our PALs. We also have a few that oversee co-curricular programs, so we call them CALs, C-A-L, or co-curricular assessment liaisons. They do receive some release time or overload time, anywhere from 1.5 to 3 units, depending on how many programs they oversee. They are not meant to do all of the assessment work. They are meant to lead it, coordinate it, remind people in their program what is supposed to be happening this semester or this year. And then they are supposed to document the processes that happen that year and submit some annual documents each year, which again, I'll go into a little bit more later. So we do offer an onboarding process. We have it all spelled out in a document on how we onboard new PALs. So first we email them and give them a copy of the PAL responsibility document. So it lists all the things that we're gonna, ask of them. And then we meet, either Elizabeth or I meet with them one-on-one to go over everything, go over the required documents that are due at the end of the year. We show them our resource site on our internal portal, which we call myMSMU. We help them maybe set up a little calendar so they can kind of make sure they're on task throughout the year. We also suggest they attend some training or professional development. So we do offer training in-house. Elizabeth actually is in charge of the training on our Weave software that we use to house and input our assessment results. And then we also offer other professional development opportunities. Our regional accreditor, WASC, used to offer, before COVID, some in-person Assessment 101 or Assessment 201 offerings, and every other year they would be in Southern California. So we could have PALs go attend those, and it wouldn't cost us a lot of money. Like, we didn't have to pay for transportation. And then Weave also has some webinars, and that some are free and some do cost money. But it's a reasonable cost that the assessment budget is able to cover those for PALs. And then here are the annual documents that we collect, and the Academic Assessment Committee evaluates them according to an established rubric that we've created. So they submit an updated assessment plan, an updated curriculum map. They do enter results into Weave. To get a little bit more detail and show trends over time, we do also ask them to submit a summary of data results, one for each outcome. And then they do submit what we call our annual outcomes report, where the focus is really on what did you say you were going to do last time to improve teaching, to improve student learning? What actions did you say you were going to do, and have you done them? Like, how have you closed the loop and gone back, right? And just to give you, sorry, went backwards there by mistake. Just to give you an idea of our assessment cycle here, this is our timeline for each year. This is what the Academic Assessment Committee oversees. So you can see here in 21-22, this fall, we are doing our Global Awareness and Understanding Assessment. And then in the spring, we'll be doing Oral Communication and Diversity Assessment. And so in 5 years, we've cycled through all of our ILOs, and some of these are LACE outcomes that we also oversee. Or sorry, LACE is our Gen Ed, the name for our general education. It's called Liberal Arts Core Evaluation, Core Education. Sorry, I don't have to say it very often. I always call it LACE. Okay, then a little bit more on our institutional learning outcomes. So we have an institutional assessment plan. I'll show you a snippet in just a minute. In order to collect data towards those outcomes, we do a variety of things. One of them is our rubric scoring parties. And so our rubric scoring parties are where we first we pre-identify which courses align with all of those outcomes that I mentioned earlier. And then we collect student artifacts. So we collect work from those instructors that are teaching those courses. We have a random process where we randomly select a number of them. We collect about 80 or so. We then de-identify them. We take off names, faculty names, student names. We take off course identifiers as much as possible, and we code them. And then we meet and norm the rubric as a group. So we have what we call a norming session. We go through a couple sample student artifacts as a group to really help make sure that everyone is using the rubric in the same way, right? That we understand the difference between cell 1 and cell 2 and so on. And then once we've done that, each participant gets kind of a pile of work for them to work on. We collect those scores, we discuss the results, we quickly analyze, mostly percentages, what's, the percent of students who achieved a 3 or higher on the 4-point rubric, each of the criteria. We talk about what that means. And we write up what we call a data analysis meeting. So then we talk about, what was surprising, where did the students, do well, where did they struggle? Are there trends over time? What actions can we take to improve teaching and learning, and so on. We also then collect program results through Weave reports. We are able to, when programs have an outcome that they align with a strategic initiative, they align with a supported, I forget the name of it in Weave, but anyway, if they align with one of our ILOs, they can indicate that in Weave, and then we can run a report, and it gathers all of those results into one report so that we can then create a document showing those results. And then we also do collect some indirect survey from our graduating senior survey that asks them on a Likert scale how well Mount St. Mary's, helped them improve in these certain areas. And then we also make sure that we are sharing out our results. So there's a snippet there of an infographic. We've been creating infographics with our results. We share those on our websites, in our internal website or external website. We also have an assessment newsletter twice a year, once every semester, that we do share those out. And then here's just a snippet of our institutional assessment plan. It may be hard for you to read, but the outcome is there, obviously. And then we indicate the evidence. Where are we going to get the evidence for student achievement from? And then what's the criteria we're going to use to assess it or evaluate it? The goal, performance goal that we have for our students, and then a timeline of when we're going to collect the data, when we're going to analyze the results, and how we're going to share out. And so I think I think we're going to pause there and see if people have questions right now for me.
Yeah, we are. Thanks so much, Michelle, for that overview of everything, and all those graphics and everything just inspire the mind for everyone else to be able to get some takeaways from this. So we're going to pause for some questions. If you have a question, you can put those in the chat real quickly. And while I know it takes a minute to formulate questions, so I have a couple of my own ready that I'll ask while everybody else is kind of thinking. But one thing that I made note of is you mentioned that a rubric that you use to score your assessment projects.
Yes.
Is that something that you share with folks? Is it available on your website somewhere if people wanted to take a peek at your rubric that you use?
So first of all, we based it on a rubric that our regional accreditor, that WASC, uses when they are evaluating institutions. And so we based it on that. We do share it with our internal, our programs. It is on our internal website. After we score it and we highlight the cells that they're in, we then return it to the PAL and we copy the program director or department chair. And we either congratulate them on being at the developed level. The goal is that everyone would be at developed overall. So we kind of give them an overall score, like an average. And then we share out the aggregated results to the faculty assembly. And in our newsletter, we create a report. But all of that is internal right now. We don't have that on our external site, but I'd be happy to share a copy of it if anyone is interested in that.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm also going to mention, and we do have some questions popping up, but I was going to just mention one of my favorite bits from what you were talking about is that in your cycle that you have planned out, you have a very specific report that is the data collection from this year and a separate report that is, please look back at last year and tell us what you said you were going to do and how things are progressing in that regard. Because when we don't, I think we all know when we don't plan for those things they don't happen, and you have it very distinctly as part of your cycle that you're going to need to take the time to look back at those things. So that wasn't so much a comment as just I love that part of it.
That is something that we actually added later too in the last probably 5 years. It wasn't there originally.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we have a question in the chat from Marie, and Marie says, how long did it take you to get everything set up?
That is a good question. So we kind of slowly rolled it out, and then we've been modifying it as we go. But when I first started working on institutional assessment, we started with Gen Ed, right? So we said, here are the outcomes that are going to be covered in Gen Ed. And we started with that, and we created like, how many we're going to do a year. And at the beginning, we had to align them with, we had like these 18, I forget what we call them. We have since changed them, thank God. They were 18, I can't remember what we called them, but anyway, those were our outcomes for Gen Ed only. There were 18 of them. So we had to do like 3 or 4 a year in order to cycle through. But we just developed them as we were going. So like, okay, next year we're doing these 2. Let's create a rubric. We started with the AAC&U rubric or other rubrics out there. And then we got a group of faculty that teach those courses. We got them together to help us create a rubric. And then we use the rubric. And then every time we use the rubric, we revise the rubric again, usually, because there's always something that didn't quite work right. But we just kind of rolled it out slowly. And for program assessment, I was part of that very beginning in 2007, I think it was. We had every department, not every program, but every department had one member that had to be part of this, and it was a faculty learning community. We met every other Wednesday, and they walked us through the process. And in the meantime, we'd go back to our department and start things. Like we start off with goals and outcomes for a department, learning goals and learning outcomes. They gave us, a little lesson on what they were, how to write them. Here, look for examples, take it back to your department, draft something, bring it back the next time we met. They taught us to look for like professional associations. Like I was in the math department, so we looked at the Mathematical Association of America, and they have student learning outcomes that they recommend. So you start with those and then, tweak what works for your department and what doesn't. And so that was a whole year process to get everyone program assessment up and running. And then I forget how many years, but after a while we said, okay, now let's do create a plan for each program, not just your department anymore. Now it was divided out by major or program. And so it just kind of has evolved over time. For the PALs, to pay them, so we do pay them through those units, and that was something that department chairs really argued strongly for. And our provost at the time said, okay, we can do it, but it has to come from your budgets then. And they all agreed. So that money actually comes out of their budget. It's not a lot of money when you really think about the whole scheme of it, but it does help pay them and give them, some, they know they're getting paid to do this work in a sense. And sometimes they are adjuncts who are doing that work. Mostly we try to get full-time faculty, but a lot of time it is an adjunct that's doing that work, and then we can still pay them for that. And in terms of rubric scoring parties, anyone who does come to the rubric scoring parties, they used to be in person, now they're virtual with COVID, but we think we're going to keep them as virtual because it's been working really well. We do give them a $50 Amazon gift card, and that money does come out of our assessment. So it's not a lot, and a lot of people are surprised to even get anything. They just came just because, but it's been a really good process. Our faculty have been really, really good about that. And I think later, Lori can talk a little bit about her perspective on that as a faculty member.
Wonderful. That was a very good detailed response. And I think that it kind of dispels some myths and some frustrations that sometimes we have when we're new assessment professionals and we think, okay, in a year, I should have all of these things like laid out and rolling. And the reality of it is really much more gradual than that. And it's really valuable to focus on one area at a time and really get that area solid and then add the next piece to it. So thank you for that. Your colleague Elizabeth said those things were called components.
Components, the 17 components of a liberal arts education. I think they were 17 or 18 components. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So we had another question, and I think you kind of answered this a little bit, but I'll just throw it out there in case there's anything else you want to add. And the question was, how did you get faculty buy-in and get their participation? So you mentioned about, you know, offering us a, you know, stipend or something for that, which would, but that was kind of later in the process, you said. So maybe talk a little bit about some other ways that you got faculty buy-in and participation.
So we also did talk to like our faculty status committee that oversees promotion and tenure process. And we asked if that could be put on a list of things that would count as institutional participation or service, right? So that does count, participating in assessment does count as service to the program or service to the institution. And we also, there was something else I was going to say and it's gone. I can't remember.
That's all right. If it pops back into your head, you can type it
later
in the chat there. And possibly it'll come back up in the next bits that we're going to talk about. So wonderful. Okay, so we're going to move on from here, and Elizabeth is going to talk some now about that role that she has in helping to supervise some of this assessment work, and then specifically show us some goodies about program review that you all have really worked and developed.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Michelle. I'm happy to present about our program review process. Before we revised our program review process, program reviews were not happening at the Mount. They were part of the curriculum committee, and the curriculum committee oversaw, as you can hear, already had a lot of responsibilities overhauling our 17-18 components to transform them into LACE, our liberal arts core education. The process was originally designed to last 6 months. So a program review from beginning to end was a 6-month process. The departments had to rely on themselves to find their data, since we kind of at that time had a revolving door around institutional planning and research, and we didn't have a data office. There were no external reviews. Every time we mentioned we need to do external reviews, we were told that we have no money for it, no budget, and there was no follow-up. And probably the worst thing that was characterized our program review was lost reports. Every time a new chair would come into the curriculum committee, they'd go looking through boxes and files to try to find the reports from past years, and they usually didn't exist. So then that would be a perfect reason for the chair or program director to say, I can't do a program review because I don't know where I'm starting from. So we had a really, a large envisioning process around rewriting our faculty handbook. And when we rewrote the faculty handbook, there was a lot of discussion about moving program review from the curriculum committee into its own standing committee. So in 2019, the program review became its own standing committee. It has 6 elected faculty members. It has 2 people from institutional planning and research. And then it has our associate provost, Michele Starkey, representing the provost office. So when it was created as a separate committee, we kind of got up and running. One of the things we did is we followed what the curriculum committee had done, and we created a web presence. So as you can see here, we have the program review on our internal portal, myMSMU, and the committee is listed here. They usually serve for 3-year terms, and the 4 things, according to the faculty handbook, that we needed to have for the program review was a program self-study or department self-study, faculty surveys conducted by the committee, student surveys conducted by the committee, and then the external review. So those are what's required for a program review now. We created this documents page here. And the main thing we realized we had to do is we had to review the schedule of when program reviews were happening. So Michelle will open the program review schedule, the new one we have. And we moved from a quick and not happening 6-month review timeline to a 2-year review timeline. So on the first year, when we got up and running, as you can see in the far left hand column, English was scheduled for spring of 2019. fall of 2019 was philosophy and the honors program. And then spring of 2020 was religious studies, education, and social work. So we were able in that first year when we got up and running to complete 6 program reviews, which was probably more than we had maybe completed within the previous 5 or 10 years. We changed our notification of when the program review lets departments know that their program review is coming up. And the grayed out area are the ones we've completed so far. But in general, if a program review is happening the following year, then we notify them a year in advance of when it's happening and provide the supports that they will need to complete their program review. I must admit that when I first went as chair to probably the philosophy department and religious studies, Lori can speak about this. When I talked to a lot of the department scheduled that first year, they were like, we can't do it. We either don't have the previous report, or we don't have the time, or it's too big a thing to turn around so fast. And the one kind of 2 caveats we had is, well, if you complete your program review this year, you won't have to use an external reviewer because we're piloting that later on. And the second one was we got the support from the provost's office, who said one of the key best practices is tying program review to budget. And although he said we couldn't tie program review to budget, we can't guarantee them more money, we can tell those departments and programs that they won't be eligible for an increase in any funding until they have a current program review. So if you look under the self-study due date and the recommendations and commendations in the far right-hand columns, you'll see a lot of EXTs, which means extension, 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 because we just really had to get this up and running the first year. And these programs, I can't thank them enough, how wonderful they were to work with and how they did it on a dime the first year. And then now it's the 2-year process. So as you can see, our aim is to basically have 3 program reviews per year. And then on other documents that are coming up, we also created a schedule, program review committee timeline of actions. And we want to thank the institutional planning and research for this. We have 2 timelines, basically, what the program review committee needs to accomplish and what the department and program need to accomplish. So we kept tweaking, and we still tweak this timeline, but the major improvement we made was the self-study is due October 1st. The committee's report is due December 1st, and then that spring is devoted to the external review process that we're piloting for the first time this year. So some other templates we created were at the bottom here where it says templates. We created a self-study template based upon the WASC publication of what a self-study needs to contain. Before, this was probably a 20-page document, and it was constantly annotated again and again and again by the curriculum committee. What I found being a member of the curriculum committee when program reviews were not happening was every time we had a new chair, they said, but we don't have a process. We need to review the process. So the document previous to this was annotated again and again and again, and the process was discussed and discussed till things didn't happen. One poor department, like the history political science department, they were scheduled for a program review, and it probably took 3 to 4 years for it to happen, because members went off the committee. When they went off the committee, they took their reports with them. The new chair would come onto the committee and say, we don't have a process. We'd redo the process. And by the time we'd redo the process, we'd have a different chair and a different committee. So this is really simplified. It's a program review self-study template. It's basically what WASC has in their publication, but it's only, I think, a little more than 2 pages long. And so we found that this was helpful for programs. And the other one is the external reviewer faculty contract template. This we based upon another institution contacted Michelle and was asking for an external reviewer from the business department. And so we based this template on, forget the name of the university at the moment, but this is what we based it on. So as we see, we have an outline and a letter, a contracted letter to our external reviewers, what the whole process contains, what the process is, and it's in 1 page. And the way external reviewers are working for us currently is that it's a relationship between the provost office and the external reviewer. We get recommendations from the program, we get recommendations from the chair and the program director on who they think would be a good external reviewer. They need to have no relationship with the university in advance, and they need to be able to do this for free because we don't have a stipend for it. And we've been very fortunate so far in that we have external reviewers for all our for all our programs this year, first year seminar, pre-health nursing, and the art department. And they've all agreed, wonderful people from other universities to go through this process with us. And we plan to get a lot of feedback on how to improve it as we go through it this year. The other template I'd like to share with you are the program review reports. This is program, we see, and a program review. Well, actually, we can go to the program review committee report with accolades and recommendations. Thank you. So this is the basic, our process in redesigning the program review was to make it actionable, to make it doable. Michelle always says meaningful and manageable when it comes to assessment, but we figured it would be a 3 to 5 page document. Some are longer, but the basic components can contain general comments, the themes from the previous self-study, themes from faculty surveys and interviews, themes from the student evaluations, and then 3 to 5 accolades or recommendations. And then the other innovation we have that's just new this year is an annual progress report. And the annual progress report is a simple form that the program fills out a year after its program review has been completed. And they give us a progress report on what they have accomplished in relation to the recommendations. This works out really well because we just shared all of these with the program review committee, and then we've composed a letter that goes to the provost's office and says the honors program said they needed support with an administrative assistant, or the education department said they needed support with, and so we reiterate the fact that progress is happening, but we need to all be working together for it to happen. The one thing I want to mention also is about Weave. Weave has been super helpful with this because our program reviews have 4 components on Weave. The first one is the self-study gets submitted there. The external report is going to be submitted there. The program accolades and recommendations are submitted there. And then finally, these yearly progress reports that Lori can speak to more directly are going to be housed there, or are housed there. So instead of, we have no more excuse for lost documents. They are on Weave, or they're on the S drive, or if they end up not being there, then they can come back to me. So the problem with the lost documents has been solved so far. So I'll pause, I think, for questions.
Yeah, Elizabeth, thank you so much. I can just picture in my mind everybody who's on this webinar furiously writing or taking screenshots of all of those good resources that you shared, because really this is so well developed and all the pieces are planned out, and it just looks amazing. So I was jotting down some notes, and one thing that really stood out to me was this idea, like we said we had a plan and it was really complex and we weren't doing it at all, and then made that shift to a more simplified plan that's actually being used. And that's really that's what accreditors want to see. That's what provides value to students as well. And then you said it in Michelle's words, which is even better: meaningful and manageable. That I love that little theme for assessment. So that's great. There are a couple of questions in the chat, but I think it might be the same question in 2 places. And that is folks asking, can they access these documents? So are those on your internal website, or are those things that folks could go to Mount St. Mary's website and find?
Yeah, Michelle can speak to this. They're on our internal now, but we are expecting a visit from WASC in a couple of years. So maybe we can have some sort of presence on external. And if anybody emails me, definitely I can supply all of them to you. But right now they're on the internal myMSMU, but that's a good idea of making them available on the external drive. But if anybody wants any of this, I can send them all to you. So they go to my contact information. We're happy to share.
Wonderful. That's so generous of you. And it's one of the things that I appreciate about this community. And the fact that you said you took the letter from another institution and borrowed that. And that's just kind of what we do when we find good things, we share them. So, and maybe you can put your email address in the chat when you're done here so people could email you directly. That would be great. So it looks like there's a couple of other questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I want to say one I want to give kudos to. I was part of the WASC before COVID. The WASC had an academic leadership academy, and this is the big thing that I was taking notes on week after week. So they had a lot of documents too, and everybody was willing to share them. So it's in the spirit of accreditation and WASC. And I had no idea how we were going to redo program review, but going to that the WASC Leadership Academy, that was really, really helpful for me and for us in revisioning our process.
Wonderful. And there was a question in the chat about WASC. What is that? But Michelle just grabbed that and answered that. So that's perfect. So that's their used to be regional, now national accreditor on the West Coast. So, and in case there are a couple of other questions, we'll leave this open for just another minute before going to Lori. And I'll just mention, as Elizabeth was saying, if you're on this webinar and you're a Weave member, we can help you set up a template for your internal program review process as well. Just like those are customizable. And so we would be happy to set that up for you, and you can reach out to me or Jordan or anybody else on the Weave team for that. So, and it looks like Michelle's putting an email address in the chat there. So for those of you who would like to get copies of things, just grab that email address from the chat. So any other questions for Elizabeth? All right, so from here, we're going to hand it off to Lori. And Lori is one of those wonderful program assessment liaisons that we've heard about. And she's here to unravel the mystery of the PALs for us.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And so this is kind of my conversion story from anti-assessment to being more, not so much a guru about assessment, but understanding it and striving to be my best self in helping assessment along the way for our department. One thing I learned, actually, I didn't realize that our own department is paying us to be a PAL. And so I'm wondering if I can give myself a raise. No, that's not going to happen, but I just wanted, that was something pretty funny. My pronouns are she and her. And as I said, or as was said earlier, I was very anti-assessment. Part of it was I had a clash with the person that was in charge of it. She's no longer with the university, by the way. It's not Michelle and it's not Elizabeth, so it's nothing about them. And but personality-wise, I just didn't quite click with her. And then I thought it's more than personality, though. What she had was kind of an emphasis on accountability. And I wasn't chair at that time. I was a member of the department, so I was asked to be one of the original PALs, and it just gave me a bad taste in my mouth. They just kept emphasizing WASC is coming, the accreditation team, and it just created more and more anxiety for me and for everybody that was part of that group. And so their emphasis was on compliance and assessment at the end of the semester. And even though I wasn't chair, I had a chair who also was very reluctant. And we both kind of thought, well, assessment, that's for the sciences. It's not for the humanities. We teach religious studies, my gosh. So why would that relate to us? And I remember thinking, I was teaching a death and afterlife class in world religions at the time. I thought, there's no way that you can say whether, or that you could assess whether a student is more or less afraid of death from the beginning of the semester to the end of the semester. And I'm like, that just doesn't relate to us at all. And it felt like if your department did poorly, that you were a bad department or you were bad people. And so I was really anti-assessment for quite a long time. I've been department chair now for about 5 years, and we did have somebody who was in charge of our assessment, and I was very supportive of her, and actually just glad it wasn't me that was doing the assessment. And so I was supportive, but I didn't have the buy-in that I think that I'm striving to have now. And I just saw it as a box that we had to check off, just to get our contract for the next year or something. Not really that way, but just something that had to be done, and not something that I was felt kind of anyway about. But then that faculty person left the university. And so I asked for volunteers who wants to be a PAL, a program assessment liaison for our department. Even just all those acronyms bugged me. It felt like this foreign language that I couldn't even understand or couldn't even speak. And but after that person left, I asked for volunteers. Nobody volunteered. Imagine that. And so hesitantly, I was like, okay, I'm going to be the PAL. And then eventually I decided, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to do it right. I don't want to just fill out numbers, and just get the reports in and check that box off. And now I feel like I'm more dedicated to it because I see our department as a very strong department. We have really good teachers and instructors. We're dedicated to what we do. We do it well. And so I see us more as focusing on improvement and just progressing throughout each semester. And for me, it's more about, are we teaching what we say we're teaching? For me, that's what assessment is. So it's not about, oh, you're good or you're bad if you do or don't do this. So when I became the PAL, we had kind of a new start with our department. And I went through a week seminar, and in going through that, I discovered that as a department, we were pretty fragmented. So the first baby step I wanted to take with my department was to create a mission statement of our department. And I know not a lot of departments have that, but I just thought that's something that's really important for people that are in religious studies and any type of religious institution is their mission statement. So it was really good for our department in that we the first time we got together, so I used our department meetings as working meetings about what is it that's important to us, what are our priorities, so we could really talk about our passions and what's important to us to get across to our students. And so with that, by the end of the semester, we came up with this new mission statement. And what I liked about it wasn't focused on numbers, it was focused on our passions and what we do well. And so with that statement, we figured out kind of our priorities, and I'm understanding assessment more in a gradual way. So we're not fighting our other departments. We're not trying to be good. We're not doing this personality thing where if your class doesn't do well on the assessment, you're not a good teacher. It's more, what do we want to do and are we doing it? And so we're wanting to focus on, are the students comprehending what we think is important? Are we teaching what we think is important? So I see my role more as a dialogue partner and kind of a person that is a team member and a colleague, but the person that basically just is the organizer for what it is that we come up with as a department. So we're really team focused as our department. And I just have to say that what Weave offers for us as a department is a great database to put everything in, and it helps us to organize, and then it helps us to compare from year to year. So I got everything done last year and I was like, yes, I'm done. And then this year rolls around and it's like, oh yeah, here we go again. But I think I'm a little bit more enthusiastic this year than I was last year about it. Last year, I was just kind of dragging my feet. But I have to say, Michele Starkey and Elizabeth Sturgeon, they're the most hardworking, the most organized people at the university. I don't think people give them enough credit, but without them, assessment wouldn't be what it is. And I really appreciate them focusing on, okay, where are you at now? Okay, now let's go from that and let's continually strive to improve. And if we don't, let's look at what went wrong and try to improve that. So I don't take it personally anymore. And I actually, our department went from emerging in assessment to developed in assessment. And so I'm very proud of that and proud of our department. And I have to say, I did come up with a way to assess whether or not students are more or less afraid of death from the beginning to the end of the semester. I have them write a paper at the beginning and the end, and that's one of the questions they have to answer is on a scale from 1 to 5, are you more or less, or are you afraid of death? And then they rank themselves from 1 to 5. And then at the end of the semester, they do the same thing. Well, in doing that, I did find out that yes, in fact, they are less afraid because we talk about it every class, but also they're more afraid of a loved one's death than they are of their own death. And I don't think I would have gotten that kind of information if I had just kind of stuck in my little cave that I was in and trying not to get out into the sunlight of assessment. And so we have gone from emerging to developed. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about our program review experience. It was the same type of conversion. At first, Elizabeth's like, hey, you can do this. And I'm like, no, we don't want to. We don't have enough people. We don't have this, that. Hey, you have less work if you do it this year rather than next year. Oh, okay. But what really convinced me the most was Elizabeth sat down with me. She and I at my computer, and they're like, okay, this is how you do this. This is how you do that. And you just don't get that at certain universities or other places. And other people in the university that sat down and looked at the data collection and the data that we have as departments. That's just not my thing. I didn't go to graduate school to do assessment. I went to graduate school to teach and to do research. And so for me, this is something that initially was very foreign to me, but now I feel like I'm making it a part of myself. And the program review, it was before COVID. And so the year we did it, we were meeting together as faculty in person, and we just spent each of those meetings working on the part that each person signed up for. And not everybody signed up for all of the parts at the beginning. And so some people finished earlier, so then they would sign up for something more. We had our adjuncts were very involved. We had really strong adjuncts at that time. And so I'm really proud to say I'm part of this assessment team. I'm not the vital part. I think Michele and Elizabeth are, but they wouldn't say that about themselves, so I can say it about them. And it's no longer a competition. I don't feel like I take it personally. I don't feel like it's something our department takes personally, but we're like all on the same team, and we're all the cheerleader for one another, because when my department looks better, the university looks better, and so it's more about that. And then it's just more about doing what we're passionate about doing, and that's doing really good teaching. So that's my perspective on my conversion experience. Thanks for listening.
That's wonderful, Lori. Thank you. We're going to take some questions for you, so we'll let people have a minute to put those in the chat. And I'm going to mention a couple of things that jumped out to me. One is, I just really like that perspective that you started off with in saying, like, we're really proud of the work that we do. We think we're a strong department, and we're proud of our department. And I just wonder how many assessment conversations would go the right direction if that was the first question that we asked. What are you proud of about your department? What is it that you feel are the things that you do best? And then kind of work backwards from there to identify the ways that assessments can showcase that. So I think there's some magic in there. And then I was going to mention, I remember you being in the Weave Academy class when you were working on, you had already done a lot of the legwork for that mission statement rewrite. And that was just one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in that Weave Academy intro class, is you were working with the folks in your department to lay some really foundational pieces so that your assessment plan really served you well. And it took some time to dig through. I think that you had gone to a bunch of different institutions, pulled their mission statements, and kind of almost did like a lit review, and then came up with like, here's what we're doing. And it was a really cool project. So if you have questions, let's put those in the chat. And I'll mention one more thing here too, is I love the example that you shared about a really abstract concept that's important within your discipline. And there are so many of those in religious studies and the humanities. And one of the things that we say in Weave Academy is, just because something is hard to assess doesn't mean it's not accessible or valuable. And clearly that piece that you mentioned from that course was super valuable. And you found this way to kind of do a pre and post evaluation of your students and compare that and gather some information. So thanks for sharing those. How about to the audience? Do we want to have any questions for Lori there? I think that you answered everything so well and your stories were so compelling that everybody, I think they're going to be calling on you to like come and speak to the people in their humanities departments and liberal arts departments about how to embrace assessment. And I also think, Michelle, you should probably be ready for people to submit their resumes to come work at the Mount, because it sounds like a wonderful place.
That would be great. All right, we did have a little bit more to share on kind of just what's next for our process. For assessment, we are going to look at curriculum map revisions. We're going to have a focus on that this year. A lot of the programs created their curriculum maps many years ago and have not looked at them again. And so it'd be a good time to just kind of look at it again. And now that Weave has the capability of putting the actual map in Weave rather as an attachment, we're going to pair those together at the same time. We're also going to focus on aligning the course learning outcomes with program learning outcomes. And then we are looking to get an excellence in assessment designation through NALOA, the National Institute of Learning Outcomes Assessment. We applied last year and didn't get it, but we plan to try again. So we have that on our list of things to do. Elizabeth, do you want to talk about what's next for program review?
Sure. Sorry, I'll mute myself here. For program review, this is the first year we're using the external reviewers, so we'll see how that goes, and of course, continuously revise the process. We have these annual progress reports. We realize it might become bulky if we have 30 coming in every year, so we're going to monitor that to make sure there's a constant feedback loop, but make it so it's not too burdensome on the committee and also on the departments and programs. We're looking to sustain and improve our process continuously. And once we no longer have a budget freeze, we are really hoping to link program review to budget. And so those are our what next steps.
Wonderful. So we've got a couple more minutes for questions. Michelle, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, I'll just give a little Weave information while people are thinking for a minute and give them an opportunity to submit those questions that they have at the last minute here. But you heard mention in this webinar of a couple of folks who participated in some Weave Academy professional development. We have courses and workshops in addition to these free webinars that we offer regularly. We've also started some new members only workshops this fall, and those have been really popular. So if you're a Weave member and you haven't gotten that email yet, shoot Jordan a quick message and she will get you on the mailing list so that you know about all the things that are coming up for Weave and Weave Academy. What we have going on right now, coming up next week, is the Next Level Assessment Practices course. Now, this used to be known as Implementing Successful Program Assessment Strategies, and so it's just undergone a name change, but this is really part 2 in the series of developing your assessment skills. So if you've taken that Introduction to Successful Assessment Practices course, this would be the next step for you. It's that 6-week course led by Dr. Tisha Paredes and Anthony Marziliano. And then we also have a couple of our workshops still coming up this fall. We did a series on assessment tools. So if you want to dig deeper into ways that you can assess on your campus, we have a webinar that we did back in, I think in August. And I'm going to put Jordan on the spot. Maybe she can grab the link to that webinar and throw it in the chat in case anybody missed it and would like to see it. If not, it's available in our Knowledge Center. And as a follow-up to that, we had a series of workshops, 2 of those coming up in November. One of them is on how to design and use focus groups on your campus. And oftentimes focus groups are a great follow-up to a survey. So surveys get you kind of a broad swath of information from a subset of your students, but it leaves lingering questions about, well, what do they mean by this box that they checked? Or what do they mean by that box that they checked? So those focus groups let you dig a little bit deeper. She'll lead a workshop on that. And then we also have our final workshop for this year will be with Linda Susky, and she will be talking about building multiple choice tests. And so that's often a skill that faculty, if they haven't had specific training in how to do that, we think creating a test is simple, and yet when you sit right down to do it, it's a lot harder than you imagined. So she's going to offer a workshop to help build some skills in creating those multiple choice items. All of those things are things that you can register for right now. There's a QR code there that you can scan. You can also find us at weaveeducation.com and just click on the Knowledge Center or on the Academy page. And we would love to see you in one of those Weave Academy events. So with that being said, are there any remaining questions? And hearing none, I'm going to hand it off to Jordan Denton for a final aloha from the Weave team and the group at Mount St. Mary's.
Thanks, Sherry. And I am putting a link to the Knowledge Center in the chat now. So this is for all previous webinars we've done, including the assessment tools, one that Sherry mentioned, but also if you want to look at any of the others. So thank you again to Michelle and Elizabeth and Lori. As we were preparing for this webinar, we just couldn't wait for them to share their story with you. This was great information. Practical approaches, but also hearing the experiences from here's where we started to here's where we are now, and here's how we're continuing to grow and improve. So hearing the full story from them. So again, please do not forget to take the survey that will show at the end of this webinar. We do look at it. It does inform the webinars, the workshops, the courses that we offer, and the resources again that we make available for you all. So thanks for attending. This webinar recording will be sent out next week, and I will include a link to the upcoming events in that as well. Thanks so much, everyone.